We are here today because counties in Washington state are facing a financial crisis that are putting the public safety of 7 million residents at risk. This crisis is caused by an unrealistic property tax cap that prevents county revenues from keeping up with the rate of inflation. Now, we are asking lawmakers to replace the 1% property tax with a cap that limits revenue growth to a factor of inflation plus the rate of population growth. These are the actual factors that drive county costs. This change would give counties greater local control to adequately fund the essential services and programs like public safety and criminal justice at a very low cost to the average homeowner, less than $10 per year in most cases. Counties' cost of providing essential public services rise 3 to 5% every year, while revenue collection remains flat due to the arbitrary 1% cap on property tax revenue. To try to keep up with this crisis, counties have taken extreme measures to cut costs, reducing workforces, tapping cash reserves, implementing furloughs, cutting programs and services, but these actions have not and cannot address the underlying problem of the 1% property tax cap, which makes up the largest share of the county's general fund revenue. Public safety and criminal justice services are being hit the hardest, as these services make up about 75% of counties' budgets. The result is Washington state is less safe than it was a decade ago. Counties do not have the resources needed to fund essential public safety and criminal justice services. Now, we are coming down to crunch time here in Olympia, and we are urging the legislature to include property tax reform in its final budget this session. We cannot afford to wait.
Thank you so much, Dave, and thank you all for being here today. When I took office as King County Executive, I knew that before I came knocking on the legislature's door asking for better taxing authority, I had to do all we could to drive down costs and increase efficiency. I embraced creativity, I embraced innovation. We adapted lean principles from the private sector to the public sector and created a culture of continuous improvement. Our employee wellness program saved $46 million over 5 years and was recognized with Harvard's Innovations in Government Award. We cut energy costs, we integrated transit service, we improved mental health services in our jails, we empowered our employees to make positive changes day in and day out. And we did not confuse cutting service with cutting the cost of delivering service. And we have delivered. Over the past 4 budgets, we preserved crucial public services through combined efficiencies of $111 million in the general fund alone. But no amount of savings, no amount of efficiencies can overcome the ongoing annual shortfall created by a structural revenue gap. That is simple math. Our cost to provide services rises at about 3.5% per year and will over the next decade. That's just background inflation in our economy and new population coming to King County. But state law caps property tax growth at only 1%. Do the math. There's a legitimate discussion, and many of us here in this group today have had this discussion together over the years about the proper size, proper role, the proper scope of government. We ought to have that conversation. This is not that conversation. We're being put in a position where even the best run, most efficient government has to cut roads and health and safety year in and year out. As a government, we must live within our means. But we are a prosperous county, and we as a people can afford to make the public investments necessary to maintain growth and prosperity and opportunity. In King County, as you may know, construction cranes dot the skyline. We're 5 years into economic recovery, yet my most recent budget had to eliminate 400 full-time positions, perhaps the largest reduction in county history. We have the means. What we lack is a rational system capable of fairly raising adequate revenue that matches the needs of the people. We've controlled our costs. Now it's Olympia's turn to provide us the revenue authority necessary to fund the things that people want their government to provide. And this arbitrary cap on revenue threatens our ability to maintain the health and the safety of our communities. One statistic in closing: over 10 years, this cap has led to a cumulative loss to King County of $393 million. That represents services the people of King County need but won't receive now and in the future because of an arbitrary 1% cap. It is simple math. So I stand here today with my county colleagues from across the state, as well as legislators, to say to our legislators, we have done our part. Now you do yours. Base our revenue on reality. Tie it to economic factors like inflation and population growth. Take action this session and replace this arbitrary 1% property tax cap with something that paves the roads and protects the public health and keeps our streets safe. Thank you for being here today.
So it's nice to be here and actually get to speak. Most of this time of year I get people telling me what they need. And you guys are part of it. One of the big debates we've had this year is, what are we doing with marijuana revenue? How much of it goes to cities? How much of it goes to counties? And it's almost a desperate fight. How much liquor revenue goes to cities and counties? What's the split? We argue about this, and then we look at what counties actually have to do. And you're all rolling out a levy for this, a levy for that. Let's create a new silo of funding that's only for this specific purpose over here, with a tax rate on something that's probably different than the rate of growth on the thing that you're spending. And what you have created is the same thing that we have here at the state government for much of the same reason. We have a goofy budget system. It's impenetrable. No one can understand it. You have to spend years being an apprentice staffer. That's my job right now, is being an apprentice budget staff to try and understand an accretion of complicated budget formulas and special purpose levies, and no one really has a grasp on how it all ties together. And it's because we have arbitrary restrictions on reasonable, fair, evenly distributed ways of collecting taxes. And so instead, we raise taxes on poor people. We raise taxes on cigarettes. We raise taxes on just sales taxes in general. We have the worst, the most unfair tax system in the country, and it's inadequate for what counties want to do. King County's reduced their expenditure growth to something that looks like reality. It didn't look like that 5 or 6 years ago when Dow beat me like a drum running for executive. Thank you. I still like you.
Thank you.
Right, you're welcome. But we can fix it. We can make a stable revenue system that allows counties to buy different stuff. Different counties want to spend different amounts of money, provide different levels of services. Their voters ought to be able to do that with fair and consistent tax sources that don't require a special levy for this or a special mental health levy that can only be used for buying new things but you can't pay for the existing base. Just sort of goofy revenue systems that make it so taxpayers have no idea what their elected people are doing. I support fixing the sort of Tim Eyman created cap on our ability to govern ourselves, our ability to do together what we can't do individually. And I think we have to. I've tried for years. It's very hard to do. The rubber has really hit the road on sustainability of local government and state government. King County's letting rural roads go to gravel, go to dirt. I mean, this is crazy. This is one of the most prosperous counties in America, and we have gravel roads that used to be paved. I mean, it's like some apocalyptic science fiction novel. Like, you know, I'm not going to go there. But, so I think we ought to do this. I think we ought to make this happen. And you guys ought to put pressure on your people in both parties to make this happen. We also can't balance our budget by taking the resources that we're providing you as well. Because we need counties to be sufficient. Fixing the state budget by forcing cities and counties to raise taxes locally to pay for the guy standing behind me here is also a bad idea. So, thank you.
This body is a august body, excuse me. Thank you, Representative Hunter, with Councilmember Kathy Lambert as well. So I agree with many of the comments that Representative Hunter made. I used to say when I was in the legislature, it's hard to understand the budget. Most legislators don't understand it by the time it's passed. And as a Republican and former Republican member of the state legislature, I want to make clear that this is a bipartisan issue. This isn't a Republican or a Democrat issue, it's a bipartisan issue. And I've opposed tax increases throughout most of my career, and I think most of you are very much aware of that. But I don't see this as a tax vote for legislators. This has given local authority to counties, some of which will use it and some won't. But is a tool in the toolbox to be able to pay for the goods, for the services we provide for the citizens. And the impact to the average homeowner is pretty minimal. It's in the teens of dollars, and I'm talking on an annual basis. When property tax revenues were allowed to rise at 6% per year, Republicans and many others thought that was excessive. I was one of those. But today's 1% cap is just not realistic. It significantly inhibits the ability of counties to perform the most essential of their duty, and that is keeping safe, public safety. It's time for lawmakers of both parties to come together, take a good, hard, honest look at this situation, and admit that the 1% cap does not, will not, work for county government. I therefore urge Republicans and Democrats to come together in this legislative session and solve this problem. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My message is really pretty simple. My family's been serving in Cowlitz County in law enforcement collectively for over 100 years. So I have kind of a unique perspective on the public safety issue. Well, many years, what you've heard have been numbers and figures that paint a certain picture. I want to share a couple of facts from my perspective of nearly 40 years in law enforcement and a virtual lifetime of association. The reality is of this issue is not really in the numbers, but in the service. I've got the finest deputies available anywhere, and they do what they do because they care about people. While folks tell you it's about money, it's not. It is about people. It's about who we serve. More and more of our citizens are facing increased needs. They need more money, they need more social services, they need more public assistance, and more frequently, they need emergency assistance. While these needs have grown, the public servant's ability to respond to those needs has diminished through the reduction in funding and associated staff. Allow me to give you a couple of quick examples. In 1976, my father was the sheriff of Cowlitz County. I sit in the same office at the same desk that he did 40 years ago. At that time, he had 38 deputies working for him. Their responsibilities were primarily patrol, detectives, and civil duties. In 2008, that number of deputies had grown to 50 to meet the increased demands over that 30 years. Now in 2015, I'm in my second term as the sheriff of the county, and I have 40 deputies, down 10 from what it was in 2008, and only 2 more than my father had 40 years ago. And in addition to the duties that he was responsible for, we're now responsible for sex offender tracking, court security, increased training demands, more technology than we can keep up with, and an ever-increasing load of public disclosure requests and scrutiny. Today, our citizens are far more likely to see their complaints handled over the telephone or even online than actually see a deputy sheriff. That's not a level of service I'm okay with. Additionally, our response times are only held in check by the fact that so many calls are handled by telephone. This means less actual patrol time, less officers on the street, and fewer deputy-initiated calls. As an elected official, it's my constitutional responsibility to protect and maintain individual rights, and I find it increasingly difficult to provide that protection and maintenance of rights to the degree that I feel the public needs and certainly deserves. While our county population has more than doubled since the mid-70s and our calls for service have increased exponentially, our county, like all the others in this state, have been forced into an unsurvivable downward spiral due to purposeful limitations on our ability to raise necessary revenue. Even though study after study has shown that the most important services to the public are education and public safety funding has been largely ignored to the point of increased danger to our communities. It's important for the citizens of the state of Washington to make their voices heard and for the legislature to do the right thing. Listen to your county government. Listen to the local elected officials. We're asking that the state give local county government the ability to ask for help from its own residents and to share revenues from those initiatives that claim to be there to assist public safety. For the sake of our citizens, we'd ask that you give the ability to do what the counties were meant to do, provide a level of service to the citizens that the state cannot. Help us help them. Along with my fellow county elected officials, I just want to say that I love my state, I love my county, I love my neighbors, I love my God, and it's to Him that I pray this message is heard.